Welcome to Slow Night Sleepy Stories. Tonight, we journey back to the landscapes of early 20th century Korea through the poetic and melancholic lens of Lee Hyo-seok, one of the most celebrated masters of modern Korean literature. In our feature tonight, we present Bun-nyeo, a story of a young woman navigating the unpredictable currents of life, hardship, and the quiet resilience of the human heart. It is a narrative that moves like the wind through the fields of grain, weaving together the complexities of fate and the search for a new beginning. As you settle into your space, take a deep breath. Let the world outside fade away. Release the tension in your shoulders and simply allow the story to carry you into a place of stillness. Close your eyes. Let us begin. While everyone was wondering what was going on at a farm where they didn't even have a pigsty, a pig as big as a house ran past the shed and into the nursery field. It looked like a wild boar or a pack horse, not a normal pig, and right behind it, a strange dog was bounding and chasing it like a giant goose. The pig, losing its mind, scrambled wildly into the field. The friends who had been pulling weeds were so terrified they scattered in all directions. Out of all the places it could have gone, the pig specifically aimed and charged right this way. Bun-nyeo was startled out of her wits and tried to run, but no matter how hard she tried, her feet wouldn't move fast enough. Her energy drained, her back bent, and to make matters worse, a wide mud wall blocked her path, leaving her completely trapped. As she tried to dodge to the side, the pig aggressively pounced forward. There was no room to move even a finger. It felt as if her body would burst and her limbs would be torn apart under a massive rock instantly. She couldn't move her arms, and when she tried to scream, her mouth wouldn't open. Bun-nyeo opened her eyes in horror. Her back ached, and her body felt heavy. Suddenly terrified, she tried to scream in her confusion, but no sound came out. Wasn't her mouth gagged with something, and a towel stuffed in it? She tried to use her hands, but they were pinned, and her legs, her back, her head, her entire body was trapped under a heavy pig. Unless blades sprouted from her body, she couldn't fend off the enemy. Even in the dark, she felt a sense of shame at this shocking disaster. She had a body she had never even shown her mother, and she wanted to cover it with clothes, but it was only a thought. "Mother," she managed to turn her head. Her mother was lying at the far end of the room, and beyond her, she could hear her younger siblings snoring. How could there be 3 living souls in the same room and still let a night thief in? But she couldn't even blame them for being oblivious fools, as they were exhausted from the hard day's labor and deeply intoxicated by sweet sleep. She wanted to kick her mother awake, but her feet couldn't reach. It was past midnight, and the night was completely still. Not a breath of wind came through the open door, and both inside and outside were pitch black. Not a single shooting star flowed in the distant sky. There's no need for resentment. As long as just the two of us know, it's fine. Whoever I am, it's the same for anyone. Hot breath covered her forehead. There was a rustling sound, and it seemed he was tying her jacket ribbons into a knot. It was brief and seamless. The thief stole what was to be stolen, without a trace, and slithered away. Once her body was freed, Bun-nyeo jumped up and barely managed to pull the gag out of her mouth, but it was pointless to scream after the situation was over. Who on earth was that guy? She ran out and looked, but he was nowhere to be found. Trying to guess by the voice was useless, and touching the knotted jacket ribbon was meaningless. The sky was pitch black. That pitch black sky felt shameful. The ground she stepped on felt shameful, and she even felt too embarrassed to face the dark night. Her body felt heavy. She drew a few buckets of water from the well, washed her face, went into the room, and lit the oil lamp. The room that held a secret in the dark looked perfectly normal when it was bright. She felt as though a corner of the earth must have crumbled away, as though a star in the sky had disappeared, as though a chunk of her own body had been crushed. She found a broken half mirror and checked her face in it. It was actually fascinating to see that her nose, mouth, and cheeks were uninjured and right where they belonged. It was something that was bound to happen eventually, but the fact that it came so suddenly, like a lightning strike, and so absurdly, left Bun-nyeo feeling inexplicably awkward and embarrassed. As she stroked her face and body, she stared blankly at her sleeping mother, and suddenly she got goosebumps and her heart trembled. A chilling fear crept in, and she wanted to wake her mother. But when she saw those exhausted eyes open wide, looking at her with flushed pupils, Bun-nyeo could only say something else. "It's so dark and cloudy, it looks like it might thunder and rain." Was it the doing of Park Chu, the nursery supervisor? With his rough and imposing demeanor, it seemed there was nothing he couldn't do. Or could it be Myung-jun, who came as a laborer among the girls? His gaze was sharp, so he wasn't an ordinary boy, but since his family was desperately poor, it was pitiful that he had dropped out of middle school to work at the nursery. But if he had openly threatened her, would she have consented? Or perhaps Sep Chun, the errand boy at the county office. The rat-like Bong-soo, who always tried to chat her up on the street. If it was that clown, she would shudder in disgust. What should she do? Bun-nyeo, her sleep ruined, stayed up all night lost in endless thoughts. The next day, conveniently, the weather was bad, so she used the rain as an excuse to skip work and only went to the nursery the day after. The same thoughts swirled in her head, making it incredibly awkward to meet people. Casting suspicion on every single person was a difficult and exhausting task. The fact that the sky had cleared properly and the earth hadn't crumbled felt somewhat disappointing. Heaven and earth didn't seem to care anymore about the strange tragedy of one person's body than a bug scratching an unripe fruit. Actually, it was a relief. If her body's changes were reflected in the sky, her mood, Sunya, Oknyeo, and all her friends would know about it, and their inner thoughts would also be exposed. As this thought occurred to her, a sudden doubt sprang up. Were they entirely innocent either? And their innocent-looking faces suddenly seemed sly to her. She felt as though she had been caught by Park Chu and Myung-jun and couldn't lift her head properly. Even looking closely, the heavily bearded, rough Park Chu and his arrogant demeanor. If she had suffered at the hands of that guy, what would become of this body? The quiet Myung-jun silently pulling weeds. What kind of brute strength could be hidden in that aloof body? You can't know a person by their appearance. She thought this, almost as if she wished it were Myung-jun, or at least hoped it was him, but from his face and attitude, she couldn't guess if it was him or someone else. Would she live her whole life never knowing who it was? After finishing weeding his assigned row, Myung-jun, on the supervisor's orders, began to mix the chemical to spray on the larch saplings and pump it with a water pump. He sprayed water with one hand and shook the water stream with the other, and when the rubber hose slipped, the blue chemical sprayed right onto Oknyeo's face. Oknyeo was startled, thinking it was a joke, and snapped at him, asking what was wrong with him lately and why he was acting so foolishly. Myung-jun chuckled and handed the rubber hose to Bun-nyeo, whose hands were conveniently empty, asking her to spray it. As the two naturally cooperated with one pump, Oknyeo said no more. When they had sprayed the entire barrel, Bun-nyeo followed Myung-jun down to the ditch to fetch more water. The ditch was hidden by weeds and couldn't be seen from the field. Myung-jun splashed the water with his fingers, his face looking soft. "Don't you hate working?" He immediately took on a joking tone. "Who are you going to marry? Even Park Chu? Are you crazy? Are you going to get married or not?" Feeling sorry that her temples instantly turned red, he quickly followed up. "Are you going to stay unmarried your whole life? You jerk. I'm going to leave this place. There's no joy in living here. It's shameful working among girls. And if I work, I can't save my parents, and we get harassed for not paying all sorts of miscellaneous taxes. There's nothing to be grateful for in this hometown. I'm going to Manchuria. I'll wander around and try to find a gold mine. It sounds like a wild dream, right? But can anyone know a person's luck? Are you really going? What else can I do if I don't? What's the use of digging in this barren land? That place is under the sky too, so people must live there. Surely it's not just animals." When they carried the water and came back down to the ditch, Myung-jun suddenly grabbed Bun-nyeo's arm. "Will you wait for me until I come back carrying a lump of gold?" As Myung-jun's jacket ribbon fluttered in front of her eyes, Bun-nyeo suddenly snapped to her senses like a flash of lightning. The end of the ribbon was tied in a knot, dangling side by side just like the knot on her own jacket ribbon. It was you. Bun-nyeo cried out shortly and dropped her head. "Will you wait for me, no matter how long it takes?" At the sound of Park Chu's voice, the two quickly separated and went to the field. Bun-nyeo's vision blurred, and she felt a sudden wave of dizziness. After that, Myungjin never appeared at the nursery field again. The next day, and the next day, and a few days later, a rumor spread that he had indeed fled to Manchuria. Bun-nyeo's mind was so distant and scattered that she took many days off work. Bun-nyeo opened her eyes like that. 2 years after experiencing the hardships of life, her body fully blossomed, and the traces of that past secret grew dim. It was as if letters carved into bark had naturally faded away as the tree grew. Now, on the verge of facing a second, sudden, unexpected ordeal, she couldn't help but think of the past. It enveloped her entire body unexpectedly, like a flowing scent. Her blood boiled, the world seemed terrifying, her heart pounded, and her fingers trembled. Just like the time she broke the water jar, fear tightened around her throat. When she thought about how she had ended up in this situation again, her future seemed bleak. Was it a mistake to wander the streets so often? Why did she look so easy to Mangap? It was wrong from the start to go into a store without money and covet this and that. For a family on the brink of ruin, even a single set of everyday clothes was extravagant. So what was the point of Dano festival clothes? Dano festivities were for people with money. What did they have to do with a poor fool? While she peeked in here and there, touching, asking, rolling her eyes and sighing, she was completely sized up and caught by an insidious schemer. Mangap, gauging a time when the store was empty, lifted her up before she even had time to react, shoved her into the back room, and locked the door from the inside. To her violent perspective, all men were the pigs she saw in her dreams and treacherous night thieves. After stealing, they act indifferent. Tell me what you want to have, I'll give you whatever you need. Even insulting someone has its limits. Who do you think I am to pull this nonsense? Bun-nyeo suddenly got irritated and slapped his cheek hard. She couldn't keep a straight face after enduring such an outrageous act, and that was all she could do. Did you do that because you hate me? I don't know, you jerk. She snapped at him, covered her eyes with her arms, and abruptly began to cry. Actually, tears did come out. The first time in her terror, she hadn't even thought to cry, but now tears welled up. It felt like she had lost something. Something she could never get back. Her body trembled with frustration. Why are you crying? People are all like this. I'll get you a full set of clothes for Dano. He touched her head, gently squeezed her shoulder, and said, If you just act sweet, I might even give you half of this store. Hearing a presence in the store, Bun-nyeo abruptly stopped crying. Someone called out, but see, hence the owner didn't answer, the person left. Mangap hurriedly continued. My wife is paralyzed with a stroke and is dying piece by piece, so if that happens, I plan to bring you in as my new wife and let you run the store. What do you think? Even while crying, Bun-nyeo was secretly listening closely. Think about it carefully. Pressing her down firmly, Mangap stepped out of the room first. As soon as he finished sending off the customer, he opened the door a crack and called her out. Put this away. He shoved something into the fold of her sleeve. Bun-nyeo was dumbfounded. When she returned home and checked her sleeve, a paper bill fell out. It was much wider and bluer than what she usually saw. Faced with such an excessive amount, Bun-nyeo felt somewhat relieved. It was more than the monthly salary she earned working day and night as a maid at the county office residence. Her salary of a mere 4-1 wasn't even enough to cover a month's expenses. It was only because her mother and younger sibling fiercely cultivated a few plots of rented land, bringing in seasonal crops to supplement their needs, that they survived. Otherwise, Bun-nyeo's salary wouldn't have been enough to even rub on her nose. If her older brother, who lived elsewhere, were a bit more responsible, the family wouldn't be in such dire straits. But not only was the household a mess, the person himself was a scoundrel. Even while earning a steady salary at the charcoal cooperative in a neighboring town, he never contributed a penny. If he had just taken care of himself, there would be no worries, but he swaggered around arrogantly until he completely ruined himself. He wasted his income on late-learned debauchery and eventually laid his hands on public funds. By the time it was discovered, he had already embezzled over 500 won. He was immediately detained by the local police and naturally handed over to the prosecutor's office. And because the cooperative demanded restitution like a storm from the Head family who had stood as his guarantor, the Head family was jumping up and down in a fury. The family felt as desolate and dreary as if they had met their doom. Faced with this unexpected income, Bun-nyeo felt it was enormous and gratifying. What should she do with it? Adding it to the household funds felt pointless, but using it for herself felt terrifying and uneasy. How on earth should she explain the source to her family? Would they believe her if she said she got it from the official residence? In poverty, excess is actually a frightening thing. She also felt a sudden wave of fear. Wasn't this what barmaids did? Forget her family for a moment. Did she have the face to see Myung-jun or Sang-gu? Even if he was in Manchuria, Myung-jun was the one she gave her first time to. If he actually returned unexpectedly with a lump of gold, what would she do? But more than Myung-jun, what about Sang-gu, whom she met almost every day right now? She certainly did look down on him when she first came. That's why, even though they had been romantically involved for over half a year, she hadn't let him touch a single hair on her body. He, in turn, didn't even dare to think about touching her body. But was he someone to be looked down upon? Like Myung-jun, his gaze showed he was no ordinary material. They went to the same school, but unlike Myung-jun, he wasn't in a position to drop out halfway. He planned to finish and go to Seoul for higher education, and if that happened, his employment prospects would be much higher. Completely different from graduating from a local school and becoming a third-grade teacher or an apprentice at a cooperative. It was just that the long time it would take felt tedious. To finish school now and complete higher education in 2 years, when would that day ever come? By then, her family would be completely ruined. She felt that if she gave her body, things might go wrong instead of working out. So she only made says and didn't let him lift a finger. Sang-gu didn't seem to want it either and was remarkably focused on his studies. While all this was happening, she ended up in this state. How could she face Sang-gu with a soiled body? Yet she wasn't in a position to give him up immediately, and she certainly couldn't just confess her sins and cry and throw a fit. Between her thoughts, fears, and shame, Bun-nyeo's mind was in turmoil. Chapter 3. She hadn't been able to meet Sang-gu for several days because school was busy. Not having to face him right away eased her fear a bit, but her heart felt empty. In truth, she had intended to go back the very next day, but she felt too awkward and put it off for a few days. In her haste to leave Mangap's store that day, she had left something behind. It was clothing she needed to wear, so she couldn't just not retrieve it. Waiting until late at night, Bun-nyeo carefully went out to the street. There were few people on the main road. Unlike before, she approached the store with a much more nervous heart, glancing around. As if he had been waiting, Mangap strode out. Doesn't look like anyone's coming. He rattled the sliding doors closed, drew the curtains, and shut down the shop. I have to go soon. I just eyeballed the size. I wonder if they'll fit. Mangap quickly opened the door to the back room and pulled out a box. When he opened the lid, there were pointed shoes. Their pitch-black shine dazzled Bun-nyeo's eyes. He snatched her arm and led her to the narrow porch. She was more terrified than pleased. Just for a pair of shoes. He turned off one of the lights, making the inside of the shop dim. As soon as Mangap sat on the porch, he forcefully pulled her arm. She shook him off and pulled away, but was caught at the corner of a utility pole. Let's see if they fit your feet. She was dragged by force. Before they even reached the porch, Mangap swiftly killed the remaining lamp. In the darkness, Bun-nyeo collapsed violently like a wrestler. Hot breath assaulted the back of her neck. Her body felt tight, as if bound by thick ropes. Crazy bastard. It wasn't that she had come in willingly to enjoy this, but there was no strong reason to resist because although her body trembled, her mind had softened significantly through repetition. Above all, because there are no eyes in the dark, she felt less ashamed. Suddenly, a rattling noise at the sliding door made her shrink back like a snail. Mangap, who was trying to play innocent, couldn't stay quiet at the loud noise and shouted, "Is that Cheon-soo?" Having no choice but to open the door, Cheon-soo said, "It's an emergency." Before they knew it, he had come in. Her condition worsened. They want you to come home immediately. Worsened? She had a stroke and doesn't recognize people. I'll go right now, you go back in first. Because Cheon-soo quickly turned on the light, Bun-nyeo unavoidably exposed her disheveled state under the lamp. She shrank back and looked away, but she felt Cheon-soo's eyes sticking to her back. You annoying brat. Cheon-soo was more surprised by Bun-nyeo's state than by Mangap's scolding. The next day, Sang-gu came. He used a mock exam as an excuse, but May hadn't even started, so it made no sense. Regardless, it had been a very long time since she had seen him. He used to visit almost every other day, but suddenly stopped, and it had been well over 2 weeks. Of course, the bundle of books he carried was the same as before. However, his face was a bit tanned, and his eyes were staring blankly at some distant thought. There must have been a reason. While trying to subtly question him, Bun-nyeo struggled to deflect, making sure his words and mood wouldn't land on the changes in her own body. Inwardly, she felt pained and sorry, wondering if her affection for Sang-gu had already faded this much, thinking of her own different intentions. It felt like a sin just to look at Sang-gu's home. Rural schools are no fun. I'm thinking of moving to Seoul. At this unexpected remark, Bun-nyeo felt suspicious. Are there no exams wherever you go? Why Seoul all of a sudden out of nowhere? The inspections are so strict. I can't read what I want. My books even got confiscated. If I go to Seoul, I can read the books I want, and there will be plenty of friends. Books, books. Just reading school books is enough. Why are you always talking about books day and night? He untied his book bundle and spread it wide open, and several books rolled out that were not textbooks. They weren't English books or math books, nor were they novels. They were thick books with dull, reddish covers. Bun-nyeo had vaguely guessed for a while now that Sang-gu was reading such books and what his intentions were, harboring some suspicions. It would be a hassle to keep them at home, so I sorted out a few and brought them here. Keep them for me until I need them. You're going to ruin yourself acting so bold and presumptuous. One wrong move and you'll end up like Jeon-soo or Yun-pai. Don't talk nonsense. You don't know a damn thing. Sang-gu glared at her. You've been suspicious lately. Your attitude is off. Shouting, he picked up a book and slapped Bun-nyeo's cheek with it. How dare you talk back to me like that? As he slapped her turning face once more, he suddenly saw the ring tied to the end of her jacket ribbon. Where did this come from? As he yanked it, the ribbon tore off. Sang-gu's eyes instantly slanted upwards, and he shouted terrifyingly as if breathing fire. Which scumbag did you smile at? You piece of trash! You whore! He grabbed her by the hair. Her cheek stung, and her teeth felt like they were shooting up, but Bun-nyeo didn't answer. Since the opportunity had come, she almost wished he would beat her thoroughly until her limbs broke. It felt like her guilty conscience would be slightly relieved. I'd rather you just killed me with those hands. It was a true confession. Tears welled up. I was born to kill big things, not a piece of trash like you. As if trying to end it, he kicked her bodily and stormed out. Feeling as if this was the final end, Bun-nyeo felt suddenly sorrowful and regretted needlessly upsetting him. In the evening, as soon as she returned from the field, her mother was frantically agitated. Did you hear about Sang-gu? Tear stains were still puffy on Bun-nyeo's face. Have you met him much lately? Did you notice anything strange? He got taken in. What? When? Bun-nyeo's eyes snapped open. I'm on my way back from hearing the rumor in Mangan Street. It looks like he'll be tied up in the same string as Yun-pei and Jeon-soo. You never know with people. He came around noon and even left his books here. He must have sensed something and came to say goodbye. Hanging around with those reckless kids, he must have been plotting something wicked all this time. His behavior was strange, but I never thought it would go this far. In fact, Bun-nyeo hadn't guessed it would go that far. The reason she ended up arguing with Sang-gu and upsetting him earlier was actually because his words were suspicious and different from before. The boys either suffered a slip of the tongue or rushed in blindly without knowing any better. You can't judge a book by its cover. What are we going to do about this? From her mother's perspective, it was a needless worry. Higher education was a lost cause from the start. A clown like that. You picked the wrong person. She stealthily glanced at her daughter. Bun-nyeo's face looked calm yet distant. People's thoughts are different, so it can't be helped. What do you think? Aren't you angry? Why would I be angry? Observing her distant expression, her mother asked in a hushed voice, Did nothing happen between you two all this time? Bun-nyeo's face flushed hot with shame, and she looked away from her mother's probing gaze. If dead air was, it would be a disaster. She couldn't express how relieved she felt when her mother left the spot due to the awkwardness. She felt more ashamed toward the innocent Sang-gu than toward her mother. Her own body suddenly felt dirty and repulsive. Feeling restless, when it got late, Bun-nyeo went out to the alley. If she just stood at a corner in the Southgate Street, she could usually hear most of the day's news. Among the people muttering and chattering near the notice board in the middle of the street, Bun-nyeo was able to flawlessly steal snippets of the rumors about Sang-gu. Gyeon-soo was the ringleader. They were caught trying to gather a group to read together. Including Sang-gu, there were 2 from the school and 3 from the town, including Gyeon-soo and Yoon-pae. Sang-gu had only borrowed books from Gyeon-soo, but his house was thoroughly searched, and he would likely be expelled from school as a matter of course. Thinking that Sang-gu's future was now ruined, Bun-nyeo turned her steps back. She felt ashamed and regretful, feeling as if she had hidden him and acted loosely, anticipating it would end up like this. When she returned home, the books Sang-gu had left behind caught her eye exceptionally. Rather than feeling longing, they seemed like vengeful ghosts reprimanding her, so she swept them up and took them down to the fire pit. It's better to just burn them so there's no evidence left for either of us. She struck a match, and the inner pages began to burn crisply. It smelled of ink and paper, and the thick books turned into a fireball in an instant. The dark kitchen was brightened by the flames. It felt like a permanent farewell to Sang-gu. Feeling as if she had done something vicious, Bun-nyeo's vision spun dizzily. As the days passed, her heavy heart gradually lightened, and Bun-nyeo wondered if her undeniable indifference toward Sang-gu was due to her being cold-hearted. Her body felt light, as if a bridle had been taken off. Feeling that she had no one to be tied down to and no one to scold her, her heart opened wide, and she felt as if she had transformed into a completely different person. One evening, relatively late, as she was leaning against the pigsty after giving the pigs water, staring blankly inside, she was startled by a soft voice, turned around, and saw a figure looming at the entrance of the brushwood gate. Wearing a tight western suit and an unseasonal straw hat, it was unmistakably Man-gap. Terrified that someone in the house might see him, she gestured toward the outside and ran out. "Can you come outside the east gate? I'll be waiting under the city wall." Man-gap turned away and made a sudden, forceful request. "I have something to discuss. If you don't come, it'll be a disaster." He made sure there was no room for an answer and darted off, hiding his face and seeming to avoid people's eyes. His figure fleeing in the darkness was blurry. His quick behavior seemed reliable, but it was so sudden that Bun-nyeo watched his retreating figure with doubt. Was his wife's illness critical? She hesitated in her room, but because his behavior was so strange, she mustered the courage to go see him. Of course, there was also the reason that her heart was quite accustomed to him. Going out the east gate, the fields stretched endlessly, and the swamp was gloomy. The moonless night, where the sea 3 miles away could barely be seen, felt as if it would bewitch a person at any moment. Stepping onto a pathless mound and approaching the base of the city wall felt eerie and repulsive. Is this the kind of night when one gets bewitched by a fox? Thinking it would still be better to be bewitched by a person than a fox, she was almost relieved when she suddenly found Man-gap flattened against the castle wall. The man leaped over and swiftly pulled her body. In her fear, Bun-nyeo felt a reassuring strength in him, so she didn't even try to struggle and entrusted her body, his 2 arms. "Bun-nyeo." Calling her name without another word, he suddenly tightened his grip around her waist and violently shoved her. "What are you doing, biting like a dog out of nowhere? Geese!" Bun-nyeo grumbled as she helplessly fell, but a forceful face covered her mouth. Her arms trembled, and her movements were awkward. "Are words necessary?" At the voice, Bun-nyeo flinched. "Who are you?" She screamed, but her mouth was blocked. "Did you think I was only Man-gap? How naive. "You bastard, you parasite." She only managed to slap his cheek with her hand before she was immediately pinned down, unable to move an inch. "Since I thought you wouldn't listen, I perfectly disguised myself as Mangap. Tricking a girl is as easy as flipping your hand. Just wearing a straw hat and a tight suit is enough." Cheon-soo was also a man. He was too strong to handle. "It's true that things are good between you and Mangap. Seeing you come all the way out here. That guy is unbelievable. His wife is dying piece by piece. He uses goods as bait to ruin all the girls in town." The more Bun-nyeo thought about Cheon-soo's intentions, the more disgusted she felt. But since the act was already done and leaving no trace, it was a helpless situation. She could only keep it in her heart. There was nowhere to appeal, and of course, nowhere to speak of it. Strangely, however, as the days passed, her disgusted feelings gradually faded. It was a twisted fate that had begun anyway. Whether it was Myung-jin's time or Cheon-soo's time, she didn't even know who it was, and had surrendered her body by force. Initially, she had torn at herself and cried, but looking at it now, Myung-jin, Cheon-soo, and even Mangap were all the same. Energy, greed, and emotion, all men are the same. Like having one nose and two arms, there is no exceptionally superior man or better man, and within the limits of knowing only with the body, there is no one she particularly hated or feared. There was no reason she couldn't give Mangap the body she gave Myung-jun, and no reason to refuse Cheon-soo what she allowed Mangap. She just felt ashamed. Like the instinct to cover a naked body, it was a woman's disposition. Once inside the door, all men in the world are affectionate. There was no need to hold a grudge against Cheon-soo. Bun-nyeo came to think this way. Could it be said her mind had become loose? It was certain that her heart had opened wide since she began to know a new world. No matter how much she glared into her own mind, this was the only way she could think. She couldn't just blame Cheon-soo for being a pitiful bastard. Her mind was distracted, and her body felt languid. Her livelihood never improved. It was always the same, and then one day, another fire fell on her feet. Her brother's trial, which had been transferred to the prosecutor's office, was opening at the courthouse in the neighboring town. A summons naturally went to the cooperative officials, but the police, considering the circumstances, also sent a notice home. It had been so long since they last saw his face since he went in, that she wished her mother at least could attend to get one last sweet look at him before he was sent to prison. But they had no travel money to go see their flesh and blood, even though the trial was just a few hours away by train the next day. The mother and daughter could only stare at each other, tossing and turning all day. Unable to think of anything else, Bun-nyeo went out to the street late at night. Mangap was the only one who came to mind. If she pleaded with him, it would surely work out. She just hesitated because it was so awkward to ask. "Did you come to see Mangap?" He went to the hot springs for a trip. Standing there blankly like she had lost her mind because there was no point in talking if the person wasn't there, Cheon-soo regretfully patted her on the back of the neck. "Are you angry about what happened last time?" Following up. Tell me what's wrong. Since I brought it up, you should know that telling Mangap won't do any good. His heart left you a long time ago. Lately, he seems to be getting along well with Wolsun from the southern house, even though his wife could die any day." Bun-nyeo felt like she had suddenly been struck on the back of the head. Her vision went dark. "Didn't he tempt you by saying he'd give you half the store? Didn't he say he'd take you in as a second wife and let you run the store when his wife dies? He says that to everyone. That's his trick." She felt as though she had lost her pillar. Her body trembled. She hadn't trusted him for her future, but she had been deceived too cunningly. "I'm not as sly as Mangap, but why would I lie to you? Tell me whatever it is. Do you think it's beyond my power?" "It's nothing. I don't know what you'll think, but if it's money, I have some loose change here. Don't feel awkward and use it however you need." Cheon-soo took out his wallet and pressed the whole thing into her hand. Bun-nyeo inexplicably shed tears. The unforeseen kindness filled her heart, making her feel even sadder. Ever since returning from the courthouse, her mother had taken to her bed, getting up and lying down in a fit of anger. She seemed unable to sleep, haunted by the image of her son wearing baggy prison pants and a hood. Her tears never dried, and the rims of her eyes were red and swollen. How many years in prison would it be? She was more terrified than curious about the verdict. The image of the stern judge lingered in her eyes. The Head family had completely cut off all contact. Amidst this dreary atmosphere, Dano was approaching. The townspeople were buzzing with excitement because the Citizen Sports Day, held every year at the parade ground in front of the street, was about to take place grandly. It seemed people found the will to live because of this welcome holiday that came once a year. There was wrestling, swinging, archery, and a bicycle race. People would close their shops, put on new clothes, and flock to the parade ground. Bun-nyeo wasn't in a good situation, but she still secretly looked forward to the holiday. Even if she couldn't make rice cakes for the ancestral rites, she could manage to dress herself up with the things she had acquired from Mangap. Above all, she had a chance of winning a prize in the swinging competition this year. "I'll enter the bicycle race again." Hearing Cheon-soo boast made Bun-nyeo's heart flutter too. "Do you think you can beat Ulsan?" "This year, I'm definitely going all out. Where would I go? If I win the championship flag and ride around town, will you come live with me?" Always talking about living together. Even though they talked like this, on the actual day, for some reason, she couldn't muster any enthusiasm at all. While she was watching the bicycle race through the tightly packed crowd that stood like driven nails, Cheon-soo, who was leading the pack, brushed past Ulsan, who was right on his tail. When they rounded a sharp corner, he violently crashed, and by the time he got up, he had fallen to the very back. He made a fuss, claiming he was tricked by Ulsan's wicked scheme. But since Ulsan had already taken first place, public opinion wasn't in Cheon-soo's favor. Watching nervously, Bun-nyeo felt discouraged, and when her turn came and she got on the swing, her heart felt empty. Thinking, "What if I fail too?" she deliberately put strength into her legs and started to pump the swing. The ropes that had been wobbling gradually straightened out, and the ropes in her grip bent and stretched powerfully and firmly like a bow. Her body and the swing moved in perfect harmony, making it as exhilarating as riding a fast-moving cart. As she swung forward, her vision cleared, and the hem of her skirt fluttered broadly. Down below, the thousands of eyes of the people standing shoulder to shoulder moved back and forth following her bow, die. She felt as though she would soar into the sky and as though she owned the earth. The worries of the ground seemed to have flown away somewhere. The string attached to the rope stretched tautly, and it seemed like the bell would ring at any moment. From below, she could constantly hear words of encouragement and shouts giving her strength. Her body was fully extended, and first place was not far off. That was the moment. As she came in and pushed off powerfully like a rushing river with her final ounce of strength, suddenly, an unbearable sight in the woods on the opposite side caught the eye that was scanning the field. In an instant, her vision went black, her back snapped, and her strength drained completely. Could it be Wanga? Guessing while pumping the swing again, she looked down and saw a figure standing perfectly still under the shade of the trees by the stream. That wicked bastard hadn't just stopped there because he couldn't help it. He was clearly standing in that position on purpose, staring up at her intently. Perhaps he had been standing there with that intention for a long time, and luckily caught her attention. Sinister creep. Though she clicked her tongue inwardly, strangely distracted, as Bun-nyeo glared at him, the taut energy completely vanished, and the swing started to slow down. Her back bent, her legs felt weak, and she couldn't apply pressure no matter how hard she tried. Her arms trembled, making the ropes wobble, and the strength left her feet, making the footboard precarious. Her posture was already off, and her body and the swing started to fall out of sync. As the marker string that was almost about to ring the bell began to shrink away, the swing was finished, and first place flew away. Bun-nyeo could do nothing but lose her 9 parts done effort to 1 part of a mistake. The people below the ropes, unaware of the secret in the air, only sighed or shouted, pitying Bun-nyeo's inadequate skill. Since it had come to this, Bun-nyeo tried to boldly glare at the guy and fend him off from the slowing swing. However, the strange thing was that while glaring at him, far from fending him off, her own posture only became more disordered. The strength drained from her knees, and the fluttering skirt felt shameful. It was a kind of temptation. Out of over 1,000 people, Bun-nyeo was the only one looking at Wanga's figure. So to speak, the two were having a secret meeting, cleverly avoiding the eyes of the massive crowd. Wanga's sly hand gestures and Bun-nyeo's meeting gaze were akin to a silent dialogue. Bun-nyeo's face turned red with shame. Even by the time she got off the swing, her excitement hadn't easily faded. She won a small prize, but more than the prize, the bizarre thought made her body feel hot. Who should she tell about this strange incident? Wondering if it was right to keep it to herself, she looked for Cheon-soo, but couldn't just casually talk to him among so many eyes. She barely caught a chance after returning home, but Cheon-soo was heavily drunk out of anger. "Want to come out to the stream? I'll tell you an unbelievable story. I'm so angry I can't stand it, that Yul-sun bastard." Bun-nyeo went out alone first, but even as she strolled leisurely, there was no sign of Cheon-soo coming out. Was he fighting Ulsan in a fit of rage? While she paced around the willow grove, it grew dark. She went out to the stream and was returning toward the woods, idly lost in thoughts of Wanga. Had it been 5 or 6 years since he came to town looking shabby? He initially sold horseman's goods, but gradually expanded, and now he had the largest dry goods store. In terms of substance, there was a rumor that he was the richest man in town, but he still hadn't escaped his bachelor status, and it was said he sometimes went to taverns and threw money around like water. Why do Chinese men marry late? Is it because women are scarce? Bun-nyeo, who was about to enter the shade of tea. He Woods recoiled in terror and stopped. There was a tiger making the sound of her own voice. Wanga was standing in front of her, smiling brightly as if he had been waiting for her. Well, it was the exact spot he had been standing during the day. It felt like being bewitched by a goblin. Before her hair, which had stood on end, could settle down, her body was in Wanga's arms. It was too absurd to open her mouth, and happening in an instant, there was no time to spare. Why is my life so twisted? Bun-nyeo, sitting alone, looked back on her own life. When she was assaulted by Wanga in the woods, if she had fought back with all her might, couldn't she have resisted? For instance, if she had bitten his arm or picked up a stone and smashed his face, couldn't she have escaped the immediate situation? Yet she hadn't been able to do that, and as her body shrank back in a strange surge of emotion, her strength and willpower simply vanished. And that was that. It felt as though she had been completely drunk at the time. She didn't even have the face to see Cheon-soo. Well, knowing her relationship with Mangap, there was no reason for him to particularly criticize her relationship with Wanga. Cheon-soo took her from Mangap, and sequentially she was taken by Wanga. The body is like a boat drifting from ferry to ferry at will. However, if Cheon-soo, who had promised that evening, had come out to the stream without fail, her fate wouldn't have gone so astray. Should she resent Cheon-soo or blame Wanga? Bun-nyeo sighed deeply, her eyes cloudy with thought. She couldn't resent Cheon-soo, nor could she hate Wanga. It was a shameful thing to even think about, but in truth, Wanga was an exceptional human being. Should she say he was something beyond a man? Because of him, Bun-nyeo's eyes were completely opened. Her view of Wanga suddenly changed from before, and there were days when she secretly missed him. Sometimes her blood crawled, her body felt hot, and her head ached. At those times, she could only wander around the front yard or go outside the city walls to get some air. But sometimes even that wasn't enough to cool her body down. One night, she went all the way outside the city walls. On her way back, she passed through the streets. She wasn't entirely without the ulterior motive of perhaps catching a glimpse of Wanga and meeting him. With a pounding heart, she was passing the south gate when she suddenly ran into Cheon-soo. Perhaps her anxiety showed in her attitude, for Cheon-soo pulled her sleeve into the darkness, and his first words were unpleasant. "You look messed up lately." Not knowing what he meant, she played along. "Messed up? Do you mean my eyes are turned upside down?" "Maybe they are turned upside down." "What are you talking about? You're going crazy lately, aren't you? You're drunk again. Ever since you lost to Yul-sun, you're drinking day and night." "Stop playing dumb and changing the subject," he snapped, then changed his voice. "It's not good for a person to be so loose. No matter what, if you become a town tramp, it's the end." What do you mean? Are you still pretending? Your affair with Wanga. Bun-nyeo felt a sharp sting and was speechless. Someone saw you in the woods. You can fool heaven, but you can't fool people's eyes. He slapped her face. Bun-nyeo stumbled, her posture bending. If you do it again, I'll stab Wanga and lay him out. I'm so disgusted I can't stand it. After standing silently for a long time, Bun-nyeo finally opened her mouth. How wide is the lapel of your clothes? Am I tied to you? What makes you any better than Wanga? After that, it goes without saying that her relationship with Cheon-soo grew distant, and Bun-nyeo, having many things to ponder, completely cut ties with the streets for a while. Even when going to the official residence morning and evening, she purposely chose secluded back roads. Any free time outside of working at the residence was spent entirely at home. While guarding the empty house, tending to the bean plants under the fence, drawing well water, and washing her body clean, her fever cooled and her mind gradually settled. When her body was clean, her mind clear, and she looked at the neat flowers in the front yard, the past events seemed like nothing more than a dream. Her body felt light, as if she had recovered from a severe, suffocating illness. If everything had been a passing dream, she thought it would actually be a relief. She felt a renewed sense of regret for committing such outrageous acts while still having her hair braided down like an unmarried girl. Myungjun, Mangap, Cheon-soo, Wanga. She spent her days struggling to erase the phantoms that successively appeared in her mind. But it seems nothing has as many tricks as the human mind. She couldn't keep pouring cold well water on herself to cool and freeze it forever. Seeing things stirred desires, and a bizarre incident occurred that moved Bun-nyeo's heart again. An outrageous sight set a fire in her eyes. In the summer, an official residence can easily become a place of absolute disgrace. If every door and window is thrown wide open and only thin blinds are hung, the events inside the room are bound to leak out. A door is a mouth that whispers the secrets inside the walls. When the occupants inside have no sense to distinguish between night and day, the walls seem to take pleasure in shaming them. That evening was particularly hot. When it's hot, people love to take off their clothes, whether at the beach or inside the house. Bun-nyeo finished her kitchen chores unusually early that day and went into the bathroom to check the bathwater. Turning on the faucet to adjust the hot water, she had the wicked thought of wanting to submerge herself in the cool water before anyone else. But wondering what the owner couple was doing all this time, she put her eye to the crack in the wooden door. This bizarre act might have been a mistake. Through the crack, the opposite room across the hall was clearly visible. Bun-nyeo couldn't help but observe every detail of what was happening inside the room. She almost held her breath. Her blood surged and her face flushed hot. Her throat repeatedly gulped. Energizing every nerve in her body, she spread her two hands and flattened herself against the wooden door like a lizard. Forgetting completely that the tap water was pouring out and the bathtub was overflowing, Bun-nyeo stayed glued to the wooden door mindlessly for God knows how long. Whether it was because of the hot steam filling the air or the fire igniting in her eyes, her body felt as hot as a fireball. Even as days passed, the excitement didn't easily fade. So there is a world like that. Compared to that, the world she had experienced so far felt too simple and insignificant. Not a world inside a room, but a world outside the door. Her heavy thoughts that treated various experiences like sins somehow cleared up, and she even felt it was natural, and moreover, a feeling that something was lacking. The scene at the residence was definitely a huge temptation. What had temporarily been asleep woke up again and began to move with even greater force this time. No matter how much well water she drew and poured over her body, it was useless. Unable to sit calmly for even a moment, her body fluttered like a shaman's bamboo pole. If Sang-gu hadn't suddenly appeared before her eyes that day, how would Bun-nyeo have sorted herself out? Like magic, Sang-gu unexpectedly came looking for her. It had been almost a month since he was taken in. His face was puffy, but he had cut his hair somewhere along the line, so his appearance was neat. Amidst her true joy, Bun-nyeo spoke to him a bit talkatively. "You suffered a lot." "It's true, I feel sorry for my friends." Sang-gu seemed like a changed person from before, his mind open and receiving her words cheerfully, which step made Bun-nyeo inexplicably glad. Your body seems swollen. Isn't it uncomfortable? Didn't you think of me? He abruptly pulled her body close. Bun-nyeo didn't insist on pulling away. I've never missed you as much as this time. You feel suddenly cold. Using it as an excuse to stand up, Bun-nyeo closed the room door. Forgetting all the dissatisfaction and regret she had felt toward Sang-gu until now, she entrusted her body to him just as he did. More than anyone else, she missed Sang-gu the most right now. There was no past or future. To her burning body, there was only the present. Sang-gu's lips were as beautiful as a flower. When she went to the official residence the next day, Bun-nyeo secretly found the couple's innocent-looking faces amusing, while simultaneously considering her own innocent-looking state even more wicked. Sang-gu came that night too, but he didn't have the joyful face of the previous night. Arriving late, he was angry like before. His voice was blunt. I was wrong about you. Stamping his feet, it's a waste that I gave my first time to a piece of trash like you. Continuing, you animal, it was my fault for seeking you out again. How could I have known you had become like this? He inevitably slapped her cheek. I heard all the rumors. I guess I don't need to list the names one by one. Anyway, I'll be leaving soon. True to his word, Sang-gu left. It would have been better if she had just taken a severe beating from him. Since she couldn't even hear more of what he had to say and he disappeared the next day, there was nothing she could do. Was it soul? Why is it that a person is missed so much only when they are out of sight? However, a bigger disaster than Sang-gu's disappearance finally happened. Her mother, who had gone to the village, rushed in furiously with her quick temper, grabbing a club. Bun-nyeo, is it true? The reason flashed through Bun-nyeo's mind like lightning. She felt as though her body instantly leaped up and her soulless body was flying through the air. Of all the places to go to the head family's house and hear this horrific rumor, what a disgrace is this? The first blow landed. Spill it all, your behavior. Right here, right now. A flurry of blows began to rain down. Bun-nyeo stayed silent like a cow, but unable to bear it, she grabbed the arm holding the club. Her mother only grew angrier. Man-gap, Cheon-su, and who else? Spit it out. I'm so disgusted I can't stand it. Your dressing up was suspicious, and now it comes to this. The merciless beating continued. You can't live in this town anymore, just die instead. Her spine felt like it was crumbling under the harsh blows. Blood splattered from her calves. With no other choice, Bun-nyeo escaped the beating and ran out of the house. No voice came out, only tears welled up continuously. Should she jump into the sea or hang herself? Going out the city gate with a mind that felt like it was going crazy, she ran wildly across the fields. Too ashamed to run on the main road, she took the side paths. Stumbling along, she collapsed on a field ridge. Without the energy to insist on getting up again, she buried her nose in that spot and waited for night to fall. Too exhausted to even go to the sea, she spent the night collapsed among the weeds. The next day, she still didn't go home, but with nowhere else to go, she wandered the fields all day, trying to avoid people's eyes, and slept in a hut in the fields. After 4 days of this, she was spotted by a family member who was searching the fields and was unavoidably dragged back home. Instead of beating her, her mother shed tears. It felt as though she had gone through a huge ordeal. Her body recovered and her mind tightened. It felt as if she had been born again as a different person. After being fired from the official residence, she went out to the fields and helped with the farming. She forgot the streets and became close to the fields. As summer deepened, there were already signs of autumn. The fields overflowed with the scent of wild sesame mixed with the smell of grain. The scent of wild sesame brings profound, distant thoughts. Every day, Bun-nyeo returned home soaked in the scent of wild sesame. On one such day, a strange young man suddenly visited. Don't you recognize me? No matter how much she scrutinized him, she felt she knew him but couldn't quite remember. It's Myung-jun. Hearing it, it was unmistakably him. She was glad to see him. Had it been 3 years? I'm on my way back from Manchuria. I've changed, but Bun-nyeo, you've changed quite a bit too. Did you find a gold mine? Instead of a gold mine, I just beat a guy to death. Myung-jun smiled faintly. He must have suffered, but he didn't look that worn out. On the contrary, he seemed to have gained some weight. The hometown is still exactly the same. Fearing the conversation might turn to the many changes in her own life, Bun-nyeo quickly changed the subject. What are you planning to do now? Maybe I'll get a patch of field and try plowing it. If it doesn't work out, I'll run away again. His tone was absurd, yet dependable. Come to think of it, Myung-jun was her first man. She felt rather relieved that he hadn't brought back a bothersome lump of gold. If he just agreed, she wondered if she should settle down and spend the rest of her life with him. And Bun-nyeo pondered this thought. And so, Bun-nyeo finds herself standing at the edge of a new horizon, a fleeting moment of hope amidst the echoes of the past. As the story settles into the silence of the night, we invite you to let the lingering scent of wild sesame and the quiet fields of the countryside drift through your mind. Like the turning seasons, all things find their way to rest. Thank you for sharing this quiet hour with us. May the story remain with you like a gentle breeze, calming your thoughts and softening the night. Until we meet again in our next story, let your mind rest and let your body drift deeper into peaceful, quiet sleep. Good night.